I noticed that a lot of clothes that we wear, they always just really look good if you work out, if you have the shape for it.
Yeah, the body is like the hanger, right?
Yeah, you can buy the coolest clothes, brands and whatever, but if you don't have the body for it, it just looks terrible. And you can
Yeah,
buy the shittiest clothes ever, but if you have a good physique, then it always looks great. And you work
yeah.
out quite often, no? Like really regularly.
These days I'm only like 2 days a week.
Okay. Why?
Yeah, I've been doing 2 days a week for, gee, I don't know, maybe 6 months now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why did you reduce?
I just decided to try a different frequency.
Okay.
So I had initially started with like 5 days a week, and then I brought it down to 3 days a week, and then I thought, well, let's just see if I can bring it down to 2 days a week.
Okay. And you don't notice that you, I don't know, like have less energy or something, or is better for you?
No, I notice maybe a marginal increase in energy because I have better recovery.
Okay.
So I found that when my frequency was higher, my recovery was shorter, right? I had
Yeah.
less recovery time. And so I didn't notice as much of an increase in strength. I noticed more of a plateau.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's just basically to allow for more recovery time. Muscles can recover better, and then you can come back feeling stronger, more energized in the gym the next time.
I mean, that's like the best way to sell someone that you should do. Like if you're a fitness coach or something, I just have to go 2 times a week and it's fine. You get the muscles.
Yeah, but I didn't start out that way though. I did build up like a good base um with like 5 days a week
Okay.
prior to that. And then once I kind of found that like I had reached a bit of a maybe not my potential. I could obviously go further, but once I kind of felt that the gains and the progress were starting to slow, I just changed the frequency.
hmm Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me at the time, I'm trying to go like 4 times. It's really difficult to get to go more times because also like going to the gym, depending on where it is and all the things, it takes a lot of willpower for me at least. I know that you build a habit, right? And usually after, I don't know, like scientifically speaking, after I don't know how many days, it's easy. But for me, it's always a kind of a stretch. But I notice it's really good for me and I feel great about it. And I feel I need it. And I don't know why. Or I asked this question myself, like, why do I do this? Why do I like make so big effort? I also go with a bicycle until there, and it's like a hill up like this to when I get home, and it's like this huge like 20 minute commute with the bicycle, which is an extra workout on top of the workout that I already do. But still, I do it because I feel like I need it, and I ask myself. But I guess it's because of our biology, right? The human biology. We are meant to exercise, to do stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, you got to keep the body moving.
And
Yeah.
it's a connection with the body and mind, right? I wanted to talk about this kind of stuff with you, about the connection that the body has with the mind and how we all interact with reality and stuff. And that's what I wanted to talk with you today, because for people that don't know you and are listening to my podcast, so you are my mindset coach that I worked for a long time with, and you kind of helped me to overcome my limiting beliefs and still do, and you still help a lot of people with that. And maybe if you just could like define how. So we want to change oftentimes a certain situation which we are right now. We don't feel good. We are struggling with something external or internal, and that's called a reality we're living in, right? And if you could maybe just tell from with your words how we could define reality, what it is. It's a deep
Big question
question.
off the get go. Hey.
Deep question, yeah.
Well, I look at reality as what I am experiencing within myself. within my own consciousness, within my mind, and including the body as an aspect of mind. And so when I'm looking at what is reality, I will start to look for patterns, because once we can start to identify patterns, we can start to connect dots and answer some of these bigger questions. And so I think when we ask the question of what is reality, what are people often thinking of when they ask that question? Or how are they looking to, what kind of resolution are they hoping to come to by asking that question?
Oftentimes,
And
I guess it's because they want to know what's their purpose, right? Or what's the sense
it
of
could
meaning of
be, that could
life,
be
or
part of it. That could be part of it. For me, when I think of that question, what is reality? I see that question as trying to get to the bottom of what is my relationship within reality. And by reality, or when I say that, I mean my relationship within my environment, the world. So when I say my relationship within or with that world, with the environment, I'm trying to understand what's my role within it. Do I have influence within my experience of the world? Or is everything random and chaotic and I have no influence and therefore really any real relationship with the world? In other words, everything would then be based upon kind of luck, right?
Mhm.
Um, and there would be no pattern as to why things happen to certain people. So when I ask the question, what is reality? Or if that question comes to mind, then to me, that means what is my relationship with what I experience in the world? Because I want to gain a clear understanding if I do influence my reality, my experience of reality. And if so, how can I influence my experience of reality in order to improve my experience of reality?
Okay. So reality is this, it's a subjective thing, then you would say?
Mm, yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah, yes and no. There are certain things that are objective, but if you're saying, well, it's subjective, subjectivity influences the experience of reality. Subjectivity. So if I, or let's say you have one event that two people witness, they both have witnessed the same event, but have perceived the event subjectively based on their own perception, and therefore have experienced the event in their own unique way.
So basically what we would say is then that it's subjective for everyone, but that subjectivity is objective. So the fact that everyone perceives it differently is part of what reality is, which makes it again this oneness, this one thing, which is reality. If I put it in the right words.
Yeah, so the way that I think of it is that we all have direct influence over what we experience individually. And so we are all creating our own experience of reality. And so it's as though we're walking around this world, this dimension, this density within our own mind.
For example, I have now this. I realized that I live in a certain paradigm in my life right now. I feel like, okay, I'm Elias. I am this person that is, I would consider myself a very emotionally sensitive person. So I perceive emotions very strongly, being it good and bad. So, and there's certain things I would like to change. I would like to influence this experience of my life. I would love to to let go of certain beliefs that I have of myself. So one belief for myself is, for example, that I see myself as an anxious person. I am an anxious person. That's who I am. It has been like this for the past, I don't know how many years. And I accepted that that's who I am. Now I would like to change that aspect of myself. I would love to wake up one day and just not be that person anymore that is anxious. I would love to change that. So if you say, okay, we are able to change reality, which is the exterior and the interior, how what are the first steps I would need to do in order for me to be able to change that certain aspect? And that applies for any other bad emotion, like people that don't feel good enough or that suffer with depression or whatever, that they just see themselves as one part of them that is not healed, and they would love to wake up one day and not be that part of themselves anymore. How should we go about this?
Good question. Well, I think so. This is a question of shifting identity, right? So you said, I see myself as this person, as this type of person, which is a label of anxiety. I'm an anxious person. I have this label. I have this anxiety. And I know that to be my identity. The evidence that I have that as my identity is based on past experiences, right? So how, say, well, how do you know? Well, because and then you go back into your past. Well, I've experienced, let's say, social interactions or whatever it may be. I have experienced anxiety in these different examples. So therefore, I identify as that because that's been my experience in the past. And so when we're looking to create a change of how we experience ourselves, the first step is that we have to take ownership and responsibility for the fact that on some level, I have actually created this experience of reality that I label in however I choose to label it. In this case, anxiety. So I have to first observe whatever it is, whatever the story is that I have been telling myself moment to moment to moment. So, for example, you said, I am this. And in your mind, you're actually referencing your past. But because you're proclaiming that now, you are simply recreating that energy in this present moment. So that identity, anxiety, is carried into your moment to moment experience because you're simply choosing to tell the same story now and then now and then now and then now until you recognize that me choosing to continuously tell that same story is how I've been unconsciously creating that experience of reality.
So, for example, now I would like to change that aspect, right? So I first step realize that it's you who's doing that, right? It's me. I'm creating every moment of my life by the stories I tell myself based from the past, right? So I've been telling this story to myself now for I don't know how many years, and I just live this constantly on repeat. Now, what is then important for me is then, okay, I want to change it. Now I have this conscious thought, I don't want this anymore. But the problem is our subconscious is so much more powerful than our conscious brain, like the prefrontal cortex, for example, and everything that is happening in the background is just it's way larger in percentage of our brain, right? So how could we then go on, okay, I want to make this deep change within my subconscious so I don't have to consciously work so hard on this anymore to always tell myself, no, it's fine, I'm okay. That it just is, that I just am not anxious, or that I am not feeling sad so much anymore or whatever.
Yeah.
How could I go about it to change the subconscious, right? Like so many terms of like rewiring the subconscious and changing your brain. We hear about these things, and it's so difficult to go through with it and then really make this deep change, because it's difficult to change a part of our personality that just been created for so many years, and now we want to change it like this. It takes time, right? So maybe you can tell me how, what then we should do to rewire the unconscious programming.
Yeah. It's a bit of a paradox, I think, because on the one hand, people experience it as difficult, right? It's difficult to change. Yet on the other hand, people are creating new programming, unconscious programming all day long. So the perspective that it's difficult is only seen that way until we recognize how we're actually creating our own programming within our unconscious. So if you look at what is one way in which programming is created, positive or negative? Repetition, right? Uh, Learning to ride a bike was hard until one day it wasn't, only because you did it and you did it and you did it and you did it and you did it, and your unconscious said, okay, this must be important for Ilias because he keeps doing it. So let's take over all of the different elements of this activity and motion behavior so that he doesn't have to use so much conscious focus and effort every time he wants to get on a bike. And in that moment, it becomes an unconscious program, a skill set, something that you have essentially wired into you because you first had a desire and an intention. And following the desire and intention came a commitment to action. Okay. And so effectively, what you did to create that program was commit to using your moment now, your now moment, your present moment in a new way, which was to pick up a bike, get on, and go. And so the same can be said for any other type of behavior. But that's an example using a positive. I want to learn a new skill set. And so I'm driven to do that because this is something I want to learn. Now, you're asking a question about unlearning, right? Unlearning something that is a negative emotional program, right? So now you would really adopt the same approach to creating a new way of being. So let's use the example of anxiety. That's an unconscious way of being that is triggered. It becomes active in your body mind in certain instances, certain circumstances, certain situations, maybe around certain people. So now, when you're going about creating a new state of body mind that is of what? Calm, peace, relaxation, maybe confidence, flow. We want to use that moment when we're triggered into the unwanted emotional state as a moment that we can first accept its existence. We first, if we want to disidentify with an identity, we have to start observing it from a detached perspective. So instead of it being, this is what and who I am, I want to go to, I am a soul, I am spirit that is having the experience labeled as anxiety. So all of a sudden, what I'm doing initially is I'm owning that I am not that label. Rather, I am spirit that is creating the experience of anxiety.
Mhm.
So already I'm moving from feeling as though I'm a victim of something that I can't seem to control or change. Two, I am not that which I have been experiencing. It's just been an experience that I've been creating. So already I'm moving into a state of empowerment. So that's the first step that I would take. Now, let's say you go back to this example of you're programming in something new, right? Riding a bike, driving a car, whatever. You're using a moment to learn to teach yourself something new. Okay? So now you've got this triggered state, and in that moment of the trigger, it's the doorway to change. So now what I'm going to do if I want to change this moment is I'm going to start to respond to it in a new way. The old way, I might be in fear. I'm going to allow the anxiety to control my mind and my body. And so I'll be in a state of fight or flight essentially. In this new way, I'm going to sit with the feeling because I'm choosing to learn about it. And I'm choosing to sit with it so that I can change my relationship with it. We talked about relationship with the world earlier. I want to form a new way of relating with whatever the situation is that has been previously triggering anxiety. Okay. So let's say it's like a performance anxiety. And so now, as soon as I step into that environment in which I'm expected to perform, there's the anxiety. That means that my unconscious, at some point or another, has learned through fear to associate this event with this emotion. It's learned to fear the event. And so the anxiety has told me, stay away from this event because it's a threat to my survival and safety. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit with that emotional reaction. I'm going to learn through my own choice, through my own desire, to not fear the fear. I'm going to observe the fear. I'm going to watch it. And in so doing, I'm disidentifying with it. I'm observing it already. Yeah. And now, in my sitting with the emotion and the feelings, the sensations, maybe the sweating, the sweaty palms, of whatever's going on, I'm accepting the existence of it. So I'm not trying to change it, run from it, repress it, distract from it. I'm sitting with it. So now I'm creating empowerment. And in this state of observance, I'm accepting and now I'm allowing. Now I can choose to allow. So the thing can be there, but I'm choosing to not be in fear of the thing being there. Now, once I've reached that point, I'm experiencing maybe a number of different things. I may experience an increase in the emotion, or I may experience a decrease in the emotion. And so now, let's say I'm experiencing a decrease slightly. Now, what I can choose to do is embrace the part of me that in this moment is calling out for help. I see these examples as parts that are actually unconscious cries for help in the form of anxiety. And so what I see is all of these unconscious cries for help, whether it's anxiety, guilt, shame, pride, grief, what have you, is an expression of non-love. It's the absence of love. And so if I sit with it, I accept its existence. I'm not making it wrong or bad. I'm not saying it shouldn't be there. I'm not resisting it because what we resist persists. So the more I fight the anxiety, would you say that's true, Elias? The more you fight it, try and change it, the more
Yes.
frustrating it becomes?
I just had this example. I had a bad like nightmare. I woke up in the morning and I woke up with this feeling of anxiety and like fear. And then I thought, fuck, that was a fucked up dream I just had. And instead of, letting it go, I went to the kitchen, I started making myself a coffee, but I was still in that dream. I was still thinking about it. And then I started to think about the dream in a way of like, okay, it's enough, Elias. You don't have to think about it anymore. It was just a dream. It's okay. Leave it now. Don't think about it anymore. Stop thinking about it, Elias. Stop. It's fine. And then it just went on the whole fucking day. This whole feeling of anxiety just went with me during the whole day because simply of this first moment in the morning of not simply just letting it go, because I resisted this feeling that I had when I woke up, and it just went with me for the whole day because of that moment. So I resisted and it persisted. Yeah.
Yep. That's it. That's it. And so if we choose to see the existence of that emotion, of that trigger, as representing a call for help, as opposed to an enemy that we have to overcome or destroy, then what we're already doing is changing our position and relationship with whatever the emotion is, the thought pattern, the belief, the trigger. And it gives us some space in which we can make a new choice. And so in that moment, we can allow, we can accept, and we can choose to embrace myself because that part of us is a part of you. A part, sometimes people ask, what is a part? What does that mean? There's a part of me this and a part of me that. Well, it's just a part represents a memory where at some point in your life, you had some type of emotional experience because experience is only really valuable if there is emotion associated with it. And the type of emotion will give us the value of that event. Is it positive or negative, happy or sad, right? So if we look at that moment as something that's actually, oh right, a part. I was speaking about parts.
Yeah.
It's a moment in which we've made a decision that was associated with an emotion. And so that memory becomes stored in the unconscious, and we refer to that memory that has a certain kind of behavioral pattern. It seems as though it has its own personality. It comes out at certain times. It speaks a certain type of language. It has a certain type of emotional expression. All it is a memory that's stored within the unconscious that is expressing in any moment in which it's designed to be triggered. And that's what a part is.
Would you say that then a big part of changing a certain aspect of yourself is to sit with the emotion or to sit with that part that you don't want and confront it? Because that's what most people don't do, right? Most people avoid sitting in silence and confront the inner demons, right? Would you say
Yeah,
then this is like step number one, take responsibility. Step number two, confront it by sitting in silence and not do anything. Don't distract you. Just really sit there with the emotions and do that over and over again. Would you say that is like really big step for change then?
exactly. And it really is the beginning of the end of fear. Once you can decide to stand in the face of that which you had been fearing, the ego's days are numbered.
And what is, because it said also in order for change to happen, the in the beginning it starts with a desire and an intention to change, right? With a desire, and then what is the what does intention what a role does intention play in this whole thing?
Well, intention is the follow-up to desire, right?
Yeah.
Intention is the exercise of your free will, as is desire. You have been given free will to choose to create any type of experience that you'd like. And so you first have a desire, and that desire is followed up by the intention, which there's a state involved, there's a behavior or an action that is expressed to follow through that intention.
Desire, oftentimes we labeled it as something negative, right? Because we say desire is like longing, lust is, wanting something, and then intention is way more on the other spectrum, like positive, like you have the intention for without this like longing for something. It's just we want it, and it's kind of linked with confidence, maybe. I don't know. Intention, because you know you can get it. I don't know.
Intention?
Yeah.
Well, I just see intention as following desire. It's not as though there's always going to be. I mean, certainly you've had intentions with varying degrees of confidence. Would you say?
Yeah. And sometimes it was like in the afterwards I realized maybe it was a wrong thing to do. Yeah.
Okay, wrong. Yeah, wrong is a whole other conversation too. It's
Okay.
a kind of a rabbit hole because what is wrong and what
What
is
is
right.
right? What that's one thing, right? Jordan Peterson often talks about it. Like, don't if you don't always try to say the truth, right? Always try to tell the truth. And if you can't say the truth, at least don't lie or something like that. And
So yeah, go on.
how what is truth, right? We always try. I want to live a virtuous life, right? Like Marcus Aurelius, who just wanted to be a good person. The Stoics, they wanted to be a good person, but oftentimes I don't know what is good. I'm trying, but oftentimes in the retrospective, I look at my decisions, 1, 2 years ago, and I think, man, I did so many wrong things.
Hmm. Okay, let's look at desire for a moment on this topic of right and wrong.
Yeah.
Because as you said, desire is often something that people have this negative association with, right? And
Yes.
they can list out different examples of that negativity. Um, Now, to understand desire better, I think it's important to go back to free will, right? You have free will,
Yes.
and free will is there for you to create experience because experience is the ultimate teacher. We learn through experience. And we know this to be true because people require their own personal direct experience with something before they can speak on it. So that's why people can't just be told, don't do this, don't do that. Well, if that were enough, then we may have a very different world. But people need to hear something and go, oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's your perspective. That's what you've experienced. I'm going to now go and make my own choices. So, free will exists for us to create experience because we learn best through personal experience. That's why we're here in the physical to have experience. Desire is part and parcel of free will. So, desire in and of itself is not good or bad, it just is. Desire, we are here because of desire. We exist because of desire. Everything that you can see around you, everything that you can point to, exists because of desire. So desire is essential to life. It's essential to experience. It's essential to learning and growth. And if we understand that, then it can help you to let go of the guilt that you experience, which is self inflicted, when you look back at certain desires that have led to certain actions, which have created certain experiences.
Yes.
Because you can say, for example, Ilias, oh, well, I did this thing, right? Obviously, there was once the desire to have that experience. And now, in hindsight, I feel bad about that experience. Okay. But you learned through having the experience and you're wiser because of it. And because of having that experience, you may not create that experience again. So it helps one to let go of the self-abuse and the self-hate that comes from not really, in my opinion, understanding that desire is just there to help you create experience, which is what you need to learn. And so, if you're learning, if you're growing, and if you're using the world as a means to accelerate your learning and growth, where is guilt justified?
It is not, because I think, I mean, it's actually, as soon as you feel guilty for something, it means you learned something, right? And that experience led you to become now that version of yourself that knows that what you did is not correct, which you had to go through this experience. Otherwise, you wouldn't have learned it. So, in that way, guilt can be neutralized again because you realize, hey, I did something wrong. I feel guilty about it. And now you realize, okay, I learned now. I'm not, that's now I am on the next level, which I have to be if I want to get closer to God, maybe. Let's say it like that.
Okay.
I,
Okay.
I don't know if,
Okay. Well, so the challenge with that is that if we learned because of guilt, we would have a different world. A lot of people don't learn to change their behavior through that,
that's also true. Yeah.
right? And so again, we go back to desire to create experience, and experience being what creates learning and therefore growth. So let's say, for example, what if someone needed to, in this life that they have chosen to live, what if they needed to learn what it's like to create a harmful experience towards another person? They needed to, their soul wanted to have that experience.
Like to kill someone, you mean?
Sure.
Okay.
Then they were given the free will to make the choice to create an experience so their soul could have the experience. Because we have to start off, Ilias, with everyone being unconditionally loved by God. So if everyone is unconditionally loved by God, then desire, then guilt is self-inflicted.
Because
And
God wouldn't do it on you. You will do it to you because God
yeah,
would never.
well, if God loves you, that means he's not also not loving you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, love isn't love. That's the meaning of unconditional. Unconditional, meaning that you're already loved
Yes.
as well. There's nothing you have to do to earn it.
The thing is, a lot of people can't feel or they can't realize that God loves them because of the thing you told me, right? Because so there's this like map that we learned with you in your coaching sessions, the map of consciousness. And maybe we could do like a mini crash course on what this map entails and like what is the lowest someone can drop in the spectrum of these emotions, of these energies, of spirituality, or whatever you want to call it. Because people that are in lower levels of energy feel like God is against them, right? They don't feel that God is there. They don't even believe it, maybe, or they don't see that they don't see the light. What is like the maybe we can start from the bottom and go up these levels and what the experience of every level kind of feels like if if you're up to that.
Well, so the map that you're referring to is created by Dr. David Hawkins, right? The map of consciousness. And it's a scale of energy. And along this scale, from 20 to 1000, which is shame to enlightenment or pure consciousness, we have the entire range of human experience. And that each level has an emotional label attached to it. So 20 being shame, 700 to 1000 being enlightenment, and between the two are is a range of different ways that you can experience yourself and therefore the world.
Yeah.
And so when people are, and we also have a column, God view as well. So when people are in any kind of emotional level, that will determine how they view themselves, how they view others, and also how they view God, as well as how God views them.
Yes.
So again, it just points to nothing is really outside of us. We're only experiencing our own level of consciousness, which is really, in my opinion, the ultimate empowerment. You're not a victim of something outside of you that has power over you. And so the map of consciousness is broken down into two sections: power and force. And when one views themselves as being, we have cause and effect, right? At the effect side of the equation, then they view themselves as a victim of what is outside of them. And so they would want the world to be different first for them to feel differently about themselves and the world. The world needs to change. Here's all the evidence for it. It's a bad world, or this person is a bad person, and maybe they're close to me and they need to change. And it's because of their behavior that I disagree with, uh, that I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. And so that's what we would call victim consciousness. And it's within the range of force. Okay. Because in those levels, in that range of consciousness from 20 to 175, in order to create some kind of change in your life, it is experienced as you having to use effort and force or will, your personal will, against the outside world, what you perceive as outside of you. So
Like
you perceive
there's
yourself as separate. Yeah.
resistance. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. And then as you get above 200, the levels of power, life becomes more effortless because your emotional state has changed. And so you're not viewing yourself as separate from the world around you as you once were when you were in the levels of force, because you're now recognizing your relationship with events that you experience. You're seeing patterns and synchronicities. So people that are typically in the lower levels, and we fluctuate all the time. You can be one level in power one day, the next day you can be in a lower level. But when you're in a lower level in force, you're less likely to see those patterns that we described at the beginning. You're less likely to see how one thing connects to another. And so you view the world as random and chaotic.
That's actually quite. So people say, okay, but that's how we explain then the law of attraction, kind of when things start to become more effortless, meaning that you are yourself in a state of elevated emotion. Meaning, if we look at the scale of Hawkins, past the level of 200, right? If we are past the level of 200, meaning feeling, I'm not even like blissed or extremely happy, but just neutral, like it's okay, acceptance, life is good. Things start to happen to you. You start having your personal success, kind of, right? Like, it's whatever personal goals you have, all of a sudden these things start to happen easily. And I experienced that myself, and it seems always so miraculous. It always seems like, so wow, how, what is happening, and when you're in a really bad emotion, if you're feeling shame, guilt, sadness, whatever, it's really hard for something good to happen in that moment, because in order for it to happen, we have to, like you said, apply force. We have to fight ourselves. We have to work hard and get all these, things done until we reach that certain thing that we want. And people might say, okay, but I don't really believe in this law of attraction, and this is all like, visualization, all that stuff. What does it work? But then if you ask yourself, well, but isn't everything that we are and what we are surrounded by actually energy, right? Because if we look into a scientific level, matter is actually just 0. Whatever 1% matter, and the rest is frequency and energy, right? So basically everything that is surrounded us is mostly just frequency and energy. And we feel that actually if we, for example, go to a very beautiful nature or place, like if we go close to the sea. That's something I realized, that every time I go next to the ocean and I look into the vastness of the ocean, from Portugal, my home country, I I just feel lighter. I go to the, I'm at home, I'm working or something, I don't feel good. I go out to the beach, I come back home, my whole emotional state just changed. And the same also for the negative. If I go through a street, if the street has a bad energy, I will feel it. I will notice this is a shady place. I won't feel comfortable. So every place vibrates on a certain frequency, and this is kind of a one how you say, one clue that tells me, hey, this is actually real. Because we are so stuck in this paradigm, right, that everything is matter, and in order to change matter, we have to change matter with matter, and we it's not that simple as it actually could be if we would just elevate our own emotions to a certain level of above 200, right? And then go through this path of surrender. That's what David Hawkins calls it, right? This path of surrender, where we just allow things to happen based on our intention, because our intention is kind of linked to the source, to the universe, to God, and it already knows what we want, and we just have to let go of our resistance for it to just happen. And I learned it a lot through you and through reading these books of Joe Dispenza and also the books of David Hawkins. And but one thing that I noticed with myself is that I know this paradigm and I believe in it and I want it to be true, but I always fall back into my old ways of viewing the world. And that's something I would love to finally change, And it's frustrating.
So again, let's go back to forming a new relationship with this identity. You said, I always so and so, right? I always fall back into it. I always this or that. And something that you could do to form that new relationship is form a new response to when you always, whatever it is, when you always fall back into the old pattern. Isn't that interesting? Here it is again. I reverted to the same pattern that I have in the past. Isn't that interesting? Versus getting down on oneself, beating oneself up for, again, repeating the same old pattern that we don't want to, right? Um, Shame doesn't really help. So people will often shame themselves or guilt themselves when they're repeating what they don't want to.
Yes, because
Yeah.
I noticed that so much, that because I take responsibility and because I know it's me who does what happens to me, then if it doesn't go well, or if I start falling back into my old patterns, I put shame and guilt on myself. Because, see, Elias, I know it's your fault. If you feel like this, because you're the creator of your emotion, and that's why you feel like shit now. And see, you can't even do that.
So there you go. What could be, using the map of consciousness, a new way of relating to the pattern. Let's say, for example, Ilias, and for everyone watching and listening to this podcast, I want you to think of right now that primary behavioral pattern or habit that you don't like and you want to change. And it could be emotional, it could be a relationship pattern, whatever it may be, something about your life that you want to change. What if you came here in this physical body as Ilias at this time to learn a new way of loving yourself through having this repetitive experience that you're having, this behavioral pattern? What if you could, like I said before about the part asking for help, hey, it's a cry out for help in this anxiety. What if you could choose, in other words, what if you could choose in the midst of that suffering that I can actually love myself despite this anxiety, despite this bad habit or what have you? And in fact, that behavioral pattern, that habit was there as a challenge for me to choose to make a new choice to love myself in moments when I have previously learned to hate myself. Because you talked about before, how do we create that new program or how do we uncreate that old program? Well, it comes down to making new choices. When you are triggered in a moment, your unconscious, your body mind is making the choice for you. And in that case, it's not really a choice. It's just activating previous choices. So I want everyone to hear this right now. This is really important to understand. All beliefs are, including limiting beliefs, are just choices that you previously made. They're decisions that you previously made to think and feel in a certain way. They are memories of your own choices. So that's why we default to empowerment by saying, I created this on some level at some point. I don't necessarily need to know when. I'm just taking responsibility for the fact that I did. Now, what I'm going to do, because I recognize that I'm a creator and I've created everything, is I'm going to use my consciousness to make a new choice in the moments when the old identity is making that choice for me. So now what you're doing, because you said, oh, the unconscious is more powerful. And typically that's how it is. Because most people fear the fear. And so when you stand in the fear and you say, yes, that program is here. Yes, I feel that, but I'm going to make a new choice. In that moment, your mind is responding to that new choice in whichever amount it may not completely resolve it, but it's listening and it's learning and it's saying, oh, Ilias wants to do this right now. Ilias wants to forgive himself. And I sit in that choice and I allow that choice, that intention to forgive myself, to love myself, to accept myself in spite of this anxiety. I allow that energy that I'm choosing to point my attention to, acceptance and forgiveness. I allow that energy to fill that part, to respond to that part, to teach that anxious part in that moment, only because I've made a new choice to place my attention in a new direction instead of the self abuse, the shame, the guilt that I would feel typically.
That it's actually straightforward. You just have to make different decisions that you used to. And it takes practice, right? Because I I think that the most important factor for you to be able to do this, what you just described, is to develop this self-awareness. And this is something that so many people lack, old and young. I see that so many people that just never developed such a self-awareness of what they're doing, you know? and that are so stuck in their beliefs and in their habits. And but at the same time, I feel like also a lot of people now are waking up more and more, becoming more um spiritual, and just asking themselves, what are we actually doing here? Because and and that's also why I think there's so much shit happening in the world right now. Because I believe that oftentimes for a big change to happen, there has to be some kind of a crisis before as well. And I mean, I don't know, how are you perceiving the things, all the things that are happening right now politically in the world, geographically? How do you go with all this information? Because if I talk to you, and if I I hear what you're saying, I always think, yeah, man, Zack is just like chilling, and he's just having a good time, and he's peaceful, and and I would love to know how you deal with all this input, all this information, Trump winning presidency, the war in Russia and Ukraine, all these things happening, and how can we humans deal with these things?
Well, man, I have good days and I have days that are challenging too, just like anyone, because I'm here participating in the collective consciousness, just like we all are. And so, what I see humanity going through at this time is a transitional phase into what will be a new golden age. And different cultures and religions throughout history have prophesized this time. And many are referring to it now as the Great Awakening, the Great Change. There's different terms. And part of this transition from levels of darkness to, levels of suffering, levels of darkness to levels of harmony, levels of light, requires the unearthing or the triggering of what has been repressed, trauma that has been repressed within the collective unconscious. And so, we talked about parts earlier, parts within your own psyche, your own mind. I choose to see, if we're looking at, have you heard of the universe being a hologram, holographic?
I know. What is that? You can go into that, yeah?
Well, within a hologram, uh, you can find the entire hologram within the smallest fractal of that hologram. Okay, so it's kind of like the microcosm and the macrocosm. Within the microcosm, the smallest element, you could say, of the macrocosm, you will find the entirety of the macrocosm.
I think I saw like pictures of like micro microscopic images, and then images of the huge galaxies, and then
Yeah,
comparing them, and they look the same.
right. It's a zoomed in image of I think it's a brain scan on one side, and it's the neural pathways, if I'm
Mm,
not mistaken,
something like
and
that.
then next to some kind of, yeah, the
Galaxy,
galaxy or
yeah.
something like this, and they look very, very similar, if not identical. And so that's the concept, that's the idea. And so I see, if we have individual parts within our own unconscious, then we as individuals, you and I, represent parts within the collective consciousness. And so as trauma is becoming triggered within the collective, that is showing up, it's expressing in different situations and events throughout the world, throughout countries, political, religious, in all segments of life, people are seeing polarity, right?
Yeah.
Everything is becoming more divided and polarized. And that's what happens in the transitional phase of creating a new state of consciousness. In order to birth a new level of consciousness within yourself, it's going to require the transmutation, which is an alchemical process of changing one thing into the form of a new thing, suffering into love. And so we can reference our map of consciousness again. Some form of lower consciousness, some form of suffering into a higher form of consciousness. And to do that, it requires the unearthing of repressed trauma, just as it does within one individual. And so that's how I choose to view what's happening right now. And if that's what's happening right now, and if that's how we choose to look at it, then it can help us form a new conscious way of relating with what is happening in the world so that we don't identify with it and say, oh no, the sky is falling and here's all the proof. Therefore, let's react differently. I'm a victim to the world and the world is out to get me. So now fight or flight and let's fight the world. Let's blame people. Let's make other people wrong. Let's force people. Let's enforce new regulations, so on and so forth. Or we can have this conscious worldview where we are seeing the interconnectedness of everything. We're seeing the patterns within the world and individuals and saying, I'm just perceiving outside of me what I am perceiving within myself. And if that's the case, and everything going on right now is just a reflection of what's taking place for individuals, then all of a sudden, I take on a personal responsibility to play my part, my role in contributing to the new golden age, in contributing to the healing of humanity, the healing of the collective, the healing of suffering, the contribution of peace. I have an obligation to contributing to that by doing it within myself because I am a part of that. You are a part of that. Everyone listening to this podcast is an important, integral part of the whole, and the whole is the sum of its parts. So as you heal yourself as an individual, that enables you to show up as a healed, more conscious version of yourself within the collective, within the world.
This collective consciousness from Carl Jung, he explains it quite well what the collective consciousness is, and also what you just said. I remember you told me that that sentence from Gandhi, the very very famous "Be the change you want to be the change that you want to see in the world," right?
Yeah.
That summarizes that aspect really really well. And also, so that's also in this book from Eckhart Tolle, right? The New Earth, that he kind of talks about this awakening, about that, yeah, that the new era of our consciousness is coming, and that's also manifesting itself through these challenges that we are having right now. So that's how you kind of navigate through all this stuff in the world. That's how you think, and that's why you maybe also be able to emotionally withstand all of these things a bit stronger than maybe other people that see themselves as a victim, right?
Well, it's because I've chosen to use my emotional reaction to events, whether that be personal or transpersonal, as a means to create transmutation or transformation within myself.
Yeah, again, like you take responsibility even for things that are not necessarily within you but out there, but you see yourself as part of the whole thing, and that's why you take responsibility and not allowing your emotions to drop, and not allowing your energy levels to drop, not your emotions, because we are humans and we always can feel bad emotions, but you don't allow, you choose to not go into the lower levels of energy. You choose to, because it's your responsibility if you want the world to be better.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I wanna make it clear, it's not that I'm not triggered or that I avoid a trigger if it's arising. It's that I've chosen to use the trigger in a different way. And so eh, I will allow the trigger um, to initiate a new choice. So I'll choose to respond to that trigger in a new way so that I can address the root cause of whatever is underlying the trigger. So if I'm seeing an event, right? Or something, and I notice some judgment about it, or there's some emotional reactivity, then I'll do my best in that moment to use that triggered state as a doorway into higher consciousness. And by that, I simply mean acceptance, forgiveness, and love.
Yes. The concept of love also, it is such a word that we use so much, but what is actually, or better said, because so I've been reading this book, right? The Course in Miracles, and it's a book that you also recommended to me, which is a very, I wouldn't even say it's a book. It's not a book. It's it's a conversation between you and Jesus, or the source itself, because Jesus is the source. And so the Course in Miracles is, I just read the preface and I'm at the text now. I haven't even started with the lessons because it's just so much. The first part of the book is just, it just says over and over again the same things, actually. No, it's just like, you are God, God is you, God loves you, you love God, everything is you, you are everything. It's just that being repeated over and over in different words. Why is that? Why is the book written so extensively, always saying one message? Like, maybe you can, because you have a way longer history with this book than I do. I just started with it, but you already know it since a long time. What is your relationship to this book? What made you find this book? What do you think of it?
Yeah, well, your first question is there is about why is it laid out in this way where it's because it is quite a thick book and it's very repetitive, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'll go back to what I said earlier about how do we learn? We learn through repetition is one way in which the brain learns. So I think it's very wise. It's indicative of the wisdom of the source of this knowledge, because the source of this knowledge recognizes that in order for you to form a new understanding of yourself and the world, you're going to need to repeatedly encountering the same truth in order to really understand, accept, and embody that truth. You simply need to repeatedly, how many times I'll tell you from my own personal experience, having read different law of attraction books and just learning about different law of attraction from different sources over the years, it took me quite a while, quite a few times to hear the same concepts said in different ways, but the essence was the same. It took me quite a few times. I don't even know how many times to actually really fully embrace what I was encountering. So that's why I believe it's continuously repeated. Certain things are repeated, and the essence of that teaching, as far as I understand, is really just forgiveness.
Forgiveness of yourself, for
Yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
forgiveness of yourself, and this goes back to guilt through creating experience born of desire. Forgiveness of choosing to listen to the voice of your shadow. Forgiveness of your decision to listen to the voice of ego. And the voice of ego is simply guilt, shame, fear. And
This
so when we guilt ourselves, when we place guilt upon one's yourself, that's a choice you're making. And to heal that choice, we simply make a new choice to forgive.
I reached a part in the book. It's I think what I lined down here, I it already has been said the past 190 pages, but only in page 191 I realized what it means. And that's when I lined it through, which is I'll read it to you. Maybe this moment in the book also hit you, but it was very, very impactful for me. So it says, if you will accept yourself as God created you, you will be incapable of suffering. Yet to do this, you must acknowledge Him as your creator. This is not because you will be punished otherwise. It is merely because your acknowledgement of your Father is the acknowledgement of yourself as you are. Your Father created you wholly without sin, wholly without pain, and wholly without suffering of any kind. If you deny Him, you bring sin, pain, and suffering into your own mind because of the power He gave. Because of the power He gave it. Your mind is capable of creating worlds, but it can also deny what it creates because it is free. That moment, man, that hit me so hard. It's I was reading that and was like, fuck. And the cool thing about this book is it's not like written in like I will tell you how it works. It is literally the source talking to you in first person. That's why it is so cool, because he's like, look, I will show you. Let me help you. But it's not like the writer of the book, which, by the way, the woman, right, that wrote this, she said it was not her. She didn't even want her name on the book. She said, no, it's not. I didn't write this. It was an intuition that came to her, and she just wrote whatever was dictated to her. So it
Mhm.
really, and if you read this book, it is impossible that a human wrote this. It's not possible.
Yeah, you can tell it was straight from source.
You know, the Bible, for example, that book has been written by a lot of people together, different books put together until it created the Bible that we know today. But this has been written by one person only, and it has more pages than the Bible. And that's 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 really not. It's not human. This is not human made. Like it's manifested itself in a physical way, so we humans can see it and can feel it. But what is written there, it's not. It's not. All right, it is from this world because the world is part of all everything, right? But it's not part of. It's not from this world as we know it. You know, it's so difficult to put these things into words, man. It's so difficult.
It is not a creation of the ego, of human consciousness. It's pure consciousness.
Yeah,
Yep, that came through.
it's beautiful, man. But
And that passage, that little bit that you read there, also goes back to what we were discussing about free will, right?
yes,
The fact that you can use the power given to you by source, by God, to choose to not accept you as being a creation of God is proof of you being a creation of God, as proof of you being given the power by God to use your power, to use that free will to say, no, I don't believe that I am a creation of God. That power that you have to make that choice is God given, which is proof of unconditional love as far as I'm concerned. The fact that God can say, here you go, do what you will with this free will, even if that is to uh, choose to hold a belief that is in complete opposition to truth. That's how much I love you.
Wow. Yes. No, I totally. It all makes sense. At a certain moment, it all clicks, but then it just vanishes again. Like sometimes you have these epiphanies, and you're like, ah, I get it now, and then the ego comes again and grabs you, and then you have to do it again and again. And that's why you say, right? It's a journey because you have to just keep on going.
Yeah. So let's kind of bring it full circle here for a moment, right?
Yes.
Because we talked about, you gave the example of anxiety, right? So a behavioral pattern, something that an emotional pattern that you want to change. And what if the approach or the pathway to making that change wasn't to get rid of something you dislike, but like I said earlier, instead to form a different way of responding to the world? And let's include anxiety as part of the world. So the world doesn't need to change. But if I want to change my experience of the world, I first need to understand that that experience is only taking place within my own field. It's within me, which is why the same event does not create the same experience for every single person. If it was the event as the source, then every single person perceiving the event would have the exact same experience, but they don't. So that's proof that it's all within you.
Yeah.
And so if we want to free ourselves from suffering, then we must first recognize, look, if you recognize that you are made in God's image, meaning that you have the same qualities of God, meaning that you are God, then would you be trying to change anxiety?
No, because he loves everything, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So if the attempt to change something is there, it means that what you see there, you believe it's a threat to you.
Yes.
But this is why we can say, if Satan is real, if the devil is real, is Satan any threat to God? If God is God?
No, and that's why it is not a threat to you because you are made in his image.
Right. So that's why, if Satan is real, he's allowed to exist. And I'm just using that as the example because what people or religion will call as the devil, I don't see as some personified being, some source of evil. I see it as just a this kind of archetype label that really represents our own darkness within. In other words, the ego, the shadow, whichever term you want to use,
Yeah.
it's your own
Demon.
fear. Yeah, it's your own fear within. And so if the devil is no threat to God, then why is your ego a threat to you? It's not something that needs to be destroyed or erased or gotten rid of. It's something to be accepted, allowed, and embraced because love is stronger than fear. So if love is stronger than fear, then just use your moment to moment experience to make the choice to give your attention to love, forgiveness, acceptance in the moments when fear seems to have a grip on your consciousness. And what you will be doing is using your God given power to create a new way of being, a new baseline of consciousness where you are continuously, naturally choosing love over fear.
That's the perfect sentence, man. Love over fear. Always choose love over fear. Even if the moment seems like it's appropriate for fear. I mean, not now in a situation if there's a tiger gonna attack you right now, but I mean in a sense of all this bad news in the world, the fear of what is AI gonna do, for example, or the fear of climate change. To to just choose love instead of fear towards it, because that's the best way you can change the world, by changing the way you yourself perceive the world.
Yeah, and that's really what the course is teaching.
I totally recommend this for everyone to just have a look at this book. Yeah. Zack, also, I don't want to, do this podcast too long, because for you it's just morning right now. You still have a full day ahead of you. For me, it's evening. So, but this was amazing. I always the conversation with you are always so deep and inspiring. So thank you so much for joining this podcast.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, everyone, you are a big light in this world, and everyone that works with you or want to work with you, it's such a blessing. I will share your social media and maybe your website on the links of the podcast, so people can check you out and reach out to you if they want to work with you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool. All right, Zack, then thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, brother.
Soldier of consciousness signing out.